Can you all hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. All right. I'm Dimple Ajmera, Charlotte City Councilwoman at large. My colleagues and I are very excited to host this town hall. In past couple of weeks, we have learned that small business has become certainly one of our priorities as many businesses are struggling. And we want to make sure that we are getting the resources out from federal, state, and local level to ensure that businesses are able to connect with those resources and apply for assistance. And I want to thank all our staff, especially Amanda Birch, amazing staff that we have, and she was able to pull this together along with the best team that she has, Donata, Wendy, and David. Thank you all so much for supporting us today. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Newton, and then we'll dive right into our panel. So Councilmember Johnson.
Good morning. My name is Renee Johnson, and I'm the District 4 Council Representative. I just want to reiterate what my colleague said. Small businesses, we've heard you, and we're hoping to give you resources today. This is a very informative and practical session. The city is working diligently to help you sustain. So I'm looking forward to today. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask via social media or reach out to us afterwards. Thank you. Mr. Newton.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. We're here today to provide a forum for the resources that are available to the small businesses in our community. At the same time, I think it's important to note that there are many businesses that have explored and exhausted a number of options, and we're not going to be able through this forum to address all of the need. Moving forward, we are in the budget process. The City Council is. One of the items we've been talking about is our reserve fund, $116 million, that is meant to assist the community in times of crisis. I think that a global pandemic would constitute a crisis. But one thing that I think a lot of folks might not realize is that we've also received a sizable amount of money from the federal government that has been appropriated for coronavirus relief. 154.5 million. Now that was just presented to the City Council on Monday night. And we'll be talking about how that will be appropriated moving forward. But we do have a public forum coming up on this coming Monday night. So if you want to speak on that matter, have your voice heard as a small business owner, please go to our city clerk's website on the City of Charlotte webpage. That is you can Google that. I don't have the actual address on hand, so it's actually charlottenc.gov /city clerk /pages /speak. You're going to want to sign up before Monday to do that. We're here to hear your voice, and that's one more way that you can have your voice heard. So I'm really looking forward to today's forum, and without further ado, back to you, Councilmember Ajmera.
Councilmember Newton, perfect timing in terms of our budget and the resources we have received from CARES Act to support our small businesses and other needs in the community. So we will start the panel. The first speaker, Thomas Stith III. He is the SBA Director for North Carolina, and he will be going over the SBA resources that are available for small businesses and the timeline associated with it. And I believe that he has a presentation ready for us. So, Mr. Stith.
Well, good morning. And first of all, I'd like to thank Council members Ajmera, Johnson, and Newton for your leadership in arranging this meeting today, and also the City of Charlotte. You're exactly right. You have an excellent staff there. Enjoyed working with them in preparation for today. My thought was just to give a brief overview of SBA's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, outlining several of our major initiatives to provide financial assistance to small businesses. North Carolina has over 900,000 small businesses employing 1.7 million people. And so while this is certainly an economic crisis, this is a crisis impacting our communities. And SBA is engaged to not only help with recovery, but moving forward. So just in general, let's take a look at the three major initiatives. On March the 18th, North Carolina was declared a disaster zone, all 100 counties. And that was the initial trigger to provide economic relief for our small business community. There are three major initiatives. We'll talk more in detail about two that really are designed to support and help our small businesses recover. The initiatives of the Paycheck Protection Program, the Small Business Debt Relief Program, Injury Disaster Loan. Just very briefly with the Small Business Debt Relief Program, that is designed to provide debt relief for existing SBA loan recipients. So if we have small businesses here in the Charlotte area that have existing SBA loans, SBA will pay those principal and interest payments for 6 months. So that's a way to try to provide needed cash flow for existing SBA holders. Two other initiatives that have received a lot of attention. First and foremost was the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. That became effective on March the 18th. That is a loan that provides up to $2 million over a 30-year period for small businesses and nonprofits. For small businesses, the rate is 3.75%, and for non 2.75%. This provides small businesses the opportunity to access needed operating income. After the March 27 passage of the CARES Act, there also was another benefit along with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and that was the ability for applicants to request an emergency grant. That would be up to $10,000, and it would be based on the number of employees a small business or a nonprofit has. There would be $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. That's available as a business or nonprofit would apply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. They would request consideration for the emergency advance. That is a grant. So if approved, the small business would receive that as a grant. They do not have to repay those funds, regardless of the outcome of their Economic Injury Disaster Loan. This initiative is directly accessed through SBA. Small businesses applied through an SBA portal. Currently, that portal is open to agriculture businesses. When the appropriations, and we'll talk more about the second round of appropriations, became depleted, the portal was closed, and those applicants that had submitted applications are currently under review. And as I mentioned this week, with the passage of the new legislation, agriculture concerns are able to apply now for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And we'll see results for that in just a moment. But now let's talk about the Paycheck Protection Program. This initiative is designed to provide small businesses and nonprofits the ability to maintain and retain their employees, and also to have some amount of funding for operating expenses such as utilities, rent and lease payments, mortgage interest. But the key component and the driving force behind the Paycheck Protection Program is that there is a forgivable clause. And those businesses that utilize at least 75% of the proceeds, and loans can go up to $10 million for a 2-year term, 1% interest. But if you utilize those funds during the first 8 weeks after receiving your loan, at least 75% toward payroll, 25% could go toward other allowable expenses, such as rent and utilities payment. That portion of the loan would be forgiven. So the incentive there is for small businesses and nonprofits to utilize those funds to ensure that people retain their jobs, hence the Paycheck Protection Program. Both for the Paycheck Protection Program and economic injury, they are in round 2 of funding. There was over $310 billion allocated over a week ago for these two initiatives. And one thing, lessons learned from the Paycheck Protection Program, was to ensure we had a mechanism to have access to all small businesses and nonprofits. So within the new allocation of funding, there was a designation of $60 billion for smaller asset size banks and credit unions, because this program initially is implemented through your lending community here in Charlotte or other cities across the state. So borrowers would go to their lender, a local bank or credit union, but because of this $60 billion designation, smaller asset banks, therefore those that are working more closely with the smaller size nonprofits and businesses, had a designation of funding. And we'll see in just a moment how that has resulted in more loans being issued, smaller amount of loans, and diversifying the businesses that receive those funds. The Paycheck Protection Program is still accepting new applications. There is still funds available. And so we're encouraging, in particular, those non-traditional businesses that may not have moved forward to seek a loan, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and your smaller businesses to still move forward and to seek out your local lenders because funding is still available for the Paycheck Protection Program. Let's briefly look at the results of both of these initiatives to get an idea of what has been their effect so far. So that on the next slide, we will see the Paycheck Protection Program results. If we could go to the next slide. So initially, as I mentioned, there was $349 billion allocated to the Paycheck Protection Program. Those funds were expended within 14 days. Because of the significant volume, SBA actually did 14 years of loans in 14 days. About 74% were 150 and below, and they went to various industries across the economy. Here in North Carolina, our businesses received over $8 billion. A little over 39,000 businesses participated in that. And I'll just say the phase 2 data is probably already outdated, but I wanted to give some idea of where we are now with the phase 2 funding. So as of 5 p.m. on yesterday, 2.3 million loans had already been approved nationally. That's about $181 billion. So we are seeing a much more significant amount of loans, smaller loan amounts. The average was $79,000. And we also had a large diversity of lenders participating, letting us know various businesses were able to access it. Even had one day last week that we only designated a window with lenders with assets of $1 billion and below to submit applications. So we're already seeing the diversity in numbers and the increase in numbers of loans received. Here in North Carolina, just to give you an idea of the Paycheck Protection's current impact, if you combine first and second phase, over $12 billion have been approved for North Carolina businesses and nonprofits. And that's going to come to a tune of over 80,000. So while there's still availability, still impact has been made, we understand there is significant demand. And finally, let's look at the next slide, and that will show the results from the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And these are the results that we have currently. Over 1,100 businesses so far have received full economic injury disaster loans, a little over $221 million. And the advance, which are in the form of a grant, a little over 30,000, and with the value of over $128 million. So in closing, I'd like to say we are still obviously implementing both initiatives, Paycheck Protection Program, literally receiving new applications every day, processing the economic injury disaster loans as well. We encourage individual small businesses and nonprofits to continue to work with SBA, our lending partners, and also our resource partners within the community, the Women's Business Center, Small Business Technology Development Center, SCORE. These entities are assisting SBA in responding to the needs of the small business community. So once again, I would like to thank the council members for the opportunity to participate and look forward to any questions at the appropriate time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Steve. That was a very good presentation on economic injury disaster loans and paycheck protection program. We have a number of questions. I was just looking at the feed, and I want to make sure we get to those questions. So we are going to compile all the questions. Our staff is monitoring those questions, and we will come back to those at the end of the presentations. So stay tight, everyone, and we will be addressing those questions after our panel is done. And so next speaker we have is our state treasurer, Dal Folwell, who is also a certified public accountant. Mr. Folwell.
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Councilwoman Ajamara and also Councilwoman Johnson and Councilman Newton, thank you for having me on. I'm Dale Folwell, the State Treasurer of North Carolina. Most of the things I'm going to talk about today is information that's available to you at nctreasurer.com. And I'll make my comments as brief as I can, but there's going to be a lot of uplifting, optimistic things in my remarks, and some of them are specific to Charlotte. So I'll share those with you as I go along. As we were getting ready for this call, somebody who was moderating it said we were all dressed up and no place to go. And that was a Nicolette Larson album from 1982. So I don't know who that person was that said that, but I remember 1982. So just wanted to say that brought back good memories. All of our hearts pump blood, but I think today and over the next several months and maybe even years, we need to be, our hearts need to pump also compassion. And the purpose of this is how this is going to impact small businesses. And I'll give you my perspective as the state treasurer of North Carolina. I'm going to give you some numbers. Most of them are in billions to give you an idea of where we are. As far as the CARES Act money is concerned, with OSBM, the Comptroller's Office and the State Treasurer's Office, about 3 weeks ago, we applied for the CARES Act money. We've now received all of that $4 billion. As you know, specifically in Mecklenburg and Charlotte, $471 million of that money went to the county of Mecklenburg. 3 counties, of which included Mecklenburg and the city of Charlotte. So that's very positive for your community. The other thing I wanted to add is that the state, in addition to the $4 billion that we received, has $1.5 billion in rainy day funds, which Representative Clark will talk about. I guess about $2 billion of unappropriated money from last year's budget. And as far as the pension plan, and I say this to you because it's not just the state pension plan, it's the local pension plan. And it's one of the biggest expenses of not only Mecklenburg County and the city of Charlotte in terms of payments they have to make, come to the treasurer's office for pension and then otherwise for health care outside of the pension plan. So as far as the pension plan is concerned, it's the 26th largest pool of public money in the world. And in this extreme volatility, the pension plan is down 3% this year. That's 3%, not 30. So we're very proud of the conservative investment styles we've been implementing. And why should that matter to the people on this call? You don't expect this from a motorcyclist, but to be quoting a philosopher, but the philosopher T.S. Eliot once said that hell is where nothing connects. So everything that we're talking about on this call connects back to something else. And the reason that you should be interested in the returns of the pension plan, even if you're not on it, is that the pension plan sends a bill to the city of Charlotte, the county of Mecklenburg every year. And when the plan does or does not hit its projected returns, those bills go up So now you have the city of Charlotte, the county of Mecklenburg, who are trying to cut down on expenses, but because of the factors unrelated to them, which is stock market declines, the potential is for bills to go up. This is having a much more dramatic effect in other parts of the country than it is ours. You're participating in one of the most solvent pension plans in the United States, if not the world. So we continue to manage that, and that's good news. On the state health plan, there's 720,000 people on that. The biggest portion of those people are in Mecklenburg County. And the pension plan has hundreds of millions of dollars in reserves for that. So that's just a kind of a try to tell you that North Carolina, from the Treasurer's Office's perspective, I don't know of any state as large as we are that's in good a financial condition to pull ourselves out of this. And I'm sure Representative Clark will add to my comments, as long as we have the transparency, the communication, the data, and the policies associated with doing this going forward. I'll close my comments and obviously be around for questions to tell you that as it relates to small business, once a week I volunteer at a motorcycle shop where I've worked in motorcycle shops most of my blue collar life. And I can tell you that small businesses, not just in Mecklenburg County, but in Moore County and any other county that starts with an M, or any other city that starts with a C, small businesses are really suffering. And I want to say something about small businesses. Many small businesses in the state, they're in business because of their joy of serving people and providing income to their employees. And it's my experience as a 61-year-old that any time that a state or a country faces a crisis like this, it's normally the lower income people that get hurt the worst. So when we hurt small business, we are not just hurting small business, we're hurting lower income people. And that's something that weighs very heavy on my heart. I'm a proponent of the correct balance between life and livelihood. But what that involves pushing the power away from Raleigh, away from governing boards. If we push the power to small businesses, small businesses know how to deal with these issues, but we've got to give them the opportunity to do so, because what we're destroying here by not getting these small businesses reopened is we're destroying the joy of achievement and the upward mobility of our society. And when you destroy the joy of achievement and upward mobility in the society, it's very, very hard to come back from that. So the state is in the strongest possible financial position as long as we get the policies, the transparency, the communication, and the data all aligned. I'm sure I'll have something else to say as we go forward, but I also want to finally say this. We're all working together, but we may be in different boats. For example, the county of Mecklenburg has decided to go in one direction preliminarily about their budget and their money from the CARES Act and the reserves, and the city of Charlotte may decide to go in another direction. We're all working together, but we may be in different boats, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I also want to applaud specifically the city of Charlotte. One of my responsibilities is chair of the State and Local Government Commission. 30 some years ago, the city of Charlotte followed the lead of the city of Winston-Salem and started actually putting money aside for their enormous unfunded healthcare liabilities. And I just want to applaud them for continuing that because I believe, and some of the council folks will correct me, there's probably about $125 million sitting there toward the liability for healthcare obligations for public service workers for the city of Charlotte. Just imagine if that decision had not been made 30 some years ago, and if that funding had not continued under the very city council that we're speaking to today. Just think about how much less reserve there would be, how much less budget flexibility would be, and then how much money would be available for the core functions of our state government, which is for public education, public safety, and public roads. So my message today is about strength and optimism as far as the Treasurer's Office, but we have to get the power back down to the small businesses of this state, give them an opportunity to demonstrate the very common sense that has put them in business to start with, that has made them successful to start with. And I think that we can strike that proper balance between life and livelihood.
Thank you, Mr. Falwell. I'm sure my colleagues will agree when I say that we stand on the shoulders of our predecessors who came before us and made wise decisions to fund our pension liabilities. And that's why today we have the reserves, and we are able to do all the programmings and support small businesses. And also certainly appreciate your update on the state health plan and state pension plan and how we are in a very strong fiscally state. So we certainly appreciate it. Next, we have our state representative, Christy Clark, who represents North Mecklenburg.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Christy Clark. I represent North Mecklenburg County, the towns of Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson. This past weekend at the General Assembly, we passed two bills, House Bill 1043, a Pandemic Response Act, which appropriated $1.5 billion in relief funding for North Carolina. And then the Senate Bill 704, COVID-19 Recovery Act, which provided some policy issues, tax relief, extension of DMV deadlines, notary issues, and things like that. In our appropriations bill, just to hit some highlights for you, we appropriated about $9 million for broadband connectivity across the state. We for about $75 million for school nutrition and $70 million for summer learning programs in education. For health and human services, we've expanded and funding there for testing, tracing, and trends, about $25 million. Food safety, shelter, foster, and childcare, $27.5 million. And the very topic we are here before today, actually for local government, we have some coronavirus relief reserve of $300 million, grants for communities $50 million, and funding for counties $100 million. And then, of course, we funded $125 million for small business assistant loans, and those are being administered through the Golden Leaf Foundation, and they are part of what is called the NC COVID-19 Rapid Recovery Loans. And so I want to say that I have heard from lots of small businesses about this issue of how can we help them. We know that everyone who is running a small business is suffering. As part of my job as a paralegal, one of the things that I do is help small business get off the ground and form their companies, make sure that their operating agreements and everything are in order so they can be successful. And so our law firm works closely with small businesses, and we know and recognize that things are not great for y'all right now. And so I have heard some people are upset that the only option for small businesses right now from the state is a loan, and that is true. And so, but in the meantime, you know that you can get this loan or apply for a loan, I should say. The loans are available for up to $50,000, and they are based on the business current revenue. Loan sizes are capped at approximately 2 months of current revenue, 6 months of no payments, followed by 48 months of principal interest payments at 5.5 interest. There are no prepayment penalties, and defaulted loans are subject to collections. Requirements have to be an individual with greater than 20% ownership. Proceeds from the loan may only be used for maintaining or restarting a business. Use of the loan funds can be used to pay off debts already incurred. And businesses are required to assign proceeds of future assistance programs to SBA loans to the repayment of their rapid recovery. So right now, this money has been reappropriated to this fund. It had been spent out before in the first round. And so Governor Cooper signed the bill into law on Monday morning. So people should start applying for these loans. You can do so at ncrapidrecovery.org. And also there is the North Carolina Business Link number that you can call that I don't have written down, but you can Google it. They can help you with anything that you might need assistance in getting a small business loan through this process, or any other issues relating to your small business during this time of coronavirus. We do have, we have $3.8 billion in our rainy day fund for North Carolina. About $2 billion of that is unallocated due to the fact that we had $2 billion unallocated funds due to the fact that we did not pass a budget in this past year. We're hoping to do that later this year and finalize our budget. We are waiting for the final numbers from our financial analysis department. We are expecting an estimated of $4 billion in shortfall in tax revenue this year. So before we can develop a budget, we need to make sure that we have the right numbers that we're working with and know where things go. So as you are watching us in the General Assembly talking about funding, that's what we're waiting on to make sure that we can keep our balanced budget as required by the Constitution, and then also make sure that we've appropriated the appropriate amount of funds to help everybody in the state and keep our state running. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Clark. We appreciate your service in our State House in this during this difficult time, and appreciate your continued advocacy for small businesses. Next, we have our County Commissioner, Susan Rodriguez McDowell. Susan?
Good morning. Hi there. First of all, I just want to say thank you to my friends and colleagues for inviting me to be part of this. I do appreciate the opportunity. So I don't want to take up too much time, as I know there's a lot of questions that want to be asked, but let me just run through these slides real quick that we have from the county on our small business stabilization loans. So if we go to the next slide, these loans are meant to be like a bridge to try to help folks if they're even applying for other loans, and trying to get them out rapidly was part of the objective. So we have a simplified application. We have, hopefully we can get funds in 10 calendar days of the completed application submission. These can be used for lease or real estate loans, operating capital, payroll, immediate payables, and utilities. And if we go to the next slide, we can see the eligible borrowers are businesses that are located anywhere in Mecklenburg County, existing business with a minimum of 2 years in profitable operation, documented by 2018 tax returns and 2019 profit and loss statement. You have up to 50 full-time employees, demonstrate that financial obligations and operating expenses could have been met if it weren't for the COVID-19 impact. Startups and companies less than 2 years old are not eligible for this program, but they can seek funding through our county small business loan fund that we have. So that is a separate loan fund. So on the next slide, you can see the terms of the loan. The minimum is $5,000. The maximum is $35,000. The term is up to 10 years. The low interest rate is 3%. The repayment is 12 months of interest only payments. So at first you can just do the interest only, followed by 9 years of principal plus interest. There's no penalties for prepayment. And let's see, the personal guarantee from all owners with 20% or more ownership in the business. The next slide, program benefits, rapid access to bridge funds, okay. Technical assistance is offered for loan recipients, and long-term amortization and low interest rates result in low monthly payments. And this shows you the low monthly payments on this table. So on the next slide, it just kind of goes through the timing of how this all rolled out. But what I really want to highlight here is the total applications that we have received so far as of May 4th is 328 applications, which totaled 8,378,917. So we've only so far approved 99 loans at 2,172,138. So we do have a ways to go. And I just also want to let folks know that this process is still open. You can still apply for these loans. And, you know, when we do run out of money, we are going to probably come back and ask for more. So I want to know how much need there really is out there. And so I think it's really important that we keep taking these loans, the applications, so that we can know how great the need is. And we'll see how far short we fall and how much more we may need to put into this fund. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to be here for any questions that might come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your presentation on the resources that are available from the counties, the small business owners. The application is open. If you've not applied and if you qualify, go ahead and apply. Next, we have our city staff, Holly Eskridge. She works with our economic development team. Holly, are you there?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me. I want to thank Councilmember Ajmira, Councilmember Newton, and Councilmember Johnson for setting this up. My team and I at Economic Development actually specifically work with our small businesses and our entrepreneurs. That's our line of work. It's our focus. And so we are here for you all. And I've had a lot of connections with our small businesses. And I think I really admire city leadership because there's a constant focus on how to best serve you all. So I want to begin by just kind of going over some things that we have at the City of Charlotte, but I also want to highlight a couple of local programs as well from partnerships that we have, the city government has. So the first is the City of Charlotte created, and if you Google City of Charlotte Small Business Resources, the page will come up. Again, that's City of Charlotte Small Business Resources. That's a sort of comprehensive web page. What we've done is we've put things that are relevant updates when it comes to federal programs, state programs, local programs, things that nonprofits are eligible, and then some private programs like the Verizon grant, which I know is phase 2 of that's closed out, but there may be a phase 3. So that's just a place for you to constantly check. And then that also has some additional things that that our city is doing. So I'm going to go over those as well. The first thing is we have an Open for Business campaign that we've launched. We really want people, one thing that we heard from our small businesses is that they really, truly want to be able to tell people that they're open. Now they're doing it within the stay-at-home guidelines, but they want people to know that they are present, that they're in this community. And then as things reopen, I think this campaign will be even more critical. So if you you can Google City of Charlotte Open for Business, or it's actually on that web page that I told you about. You can go in, there's 2 main, at this point, aspects. We plan to build it out larger. But the first is we have a dashboard. So you can actually go in and register your business, and it'll show up on a public-facing dashboard that really just gives some basic information about your business, your hours of operation, those kind of details. The second part is we have what's called an Open for Business mentorship series that we've started. We actually had our second session. Those sessions happen at Tuesday at 1 p.m. every week. And we just really try to highlight topics that we hear are important to you all. So I'll give you the 2 topics that we've done to date a week ago, yesterday, I guess, or a week ago. Anyway, the first session, sorry about that, was looking at what the SBA talked about, those programs, looking at what I'm getting ready to talk about, which is the City of Charlotte's Micro Small Business Relief Fund. And then also we had Natalie Williams on there from the Women's Business Center, who is absolutely incredible. Really just giving tips about what are the funding sources, when you apply, what should you look out for, and just basic information for your business model. And I'll say that one actually has had over 3,000 views on it. You can go back on the site. They're recorded. We put them out there for people to view at a later date. So feel free to log on, check those out. And then we did one yesterday, a really great panel on digital marketing that I think is incredibly valuable. So we're going to continue to push those out. Next week, we plan to do something on this reopening of our community. And so definitely join us at 1 p.m. You can go to the city on Tuesdays. You can go to the city's YouTube channel, Facebook, or the Gov channel. The next thing that I want to talk about is the City of Charlotte Small Business Relief Fund. So City Council put $1 million into a fund and to give out grants that are up to $10,000. These are grants, they're not loans. To businesses that qualify. We have a certain specific opportunity corridor geography that we tend to put a lot of resources in. And so that actually is also on our website. It's really easy. You can click on the opportunity corridor link. A map will pop up, and on the upper right-hand side of the screen, we'll have an address box. You can just type your address in, push search, and it'll actually show you whether you're in that geography or not. I would say to date, I've got a list, Charlotte, how you would find information. Obviously, it's on our small business resources page, but also if you Google List Charlotte, there is, if you scroll down, there is the Micro Small Business Relief Fund. They're administering that for us, and as of this morning, we've had 270 applications. The next thing I want to mention is we actually have an amazing partnership with over 20 service providers that are either nonprofit, government, or academic. All of this can be found on a website. It's called charlottebusinessresources.com. That's charlottebusinessresources.com. And I would say that site has relevant information for what you all are experiencing now. It actually tells you who the partners are, what they're offering. And then there's just general sort of helpful tips and information about business pivots or marketing and things like that. We also have a podcast series on there, which we're really excited about. And then we'll be pushing out some really good video content on that as well. And so I wanted to highlight what a few of our partners are doing on that site. They're all doing amazing things. The SBA obviously is doing some really great stuff. But CPCC has a new program. It's called the Small Business Rebound Program. Check it out. It's through their Small Business Center. Again, that's CPCC, Small Business Center, Small Business Rebound Program. It's an 8-week program that really helps you figure out how do you need to revamp your business model, change your marketing, look at cash flow, cash management plans, et cetera. The next one that I would like to mention is I talked about the Women's Business Center of Charlotte. If you go on their site, they've got amazing information, and they do different webinars in different areas of focus. So any of those, I try to attend them when I can, because every time I hear Natalie and her team speak, I learn something new that I'm able to pass on to you guys. So definitely check those out. And then the last one is Ready CLT. This is actually an initiative that is our affinity chambers. So that would be the LGBT chamber, the Black chamber, the Asian chamber, and I apologize, I think I'm missing a fourth one to you all, but they're an amazing group of people that have come together. They're actually working with our merchants associations and then a small business coalition. And what they're doing is they're really trying to push out how do they get small businesses ready to start operating so that they understand what the requirements are by your industry specific, by phase specific from the governor's rollout, but then also looking at what you can do to actually restore customer confidence. So I wanted to highlight those three. And the very last thing, and Councilmember Ajmira, I will defer to you to talk more about this, but there is a small business recovery task force. Councilmember Ajmira is on that. I would say that's also on that small business resource page. There's some really good information that happens there. And I will say, like, there's a great presentation from a couple weeks ago from the Wells Fargo's economist that I think, Mark Ventnor, that is absolutely fantastic. So I won't go steal your thunder there. I'll let you definitely dive into that more, but I did want to make sure I covered that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Holly, and appreciate you supporting our small business task force. Certainly, we had a great presentation from economists on market recovery. So if anyone who is interested in what the data looks like, certainly watch our small business task force presentation from a couple of weeks ago. Holly covered a lot of information from Open for Business, our webpage, to mentorship that is available, to our micro grant of $10,000. Again, it's a grant, it's not a loan, and CPCC and other resources that are available. I know that's a lot of information. So if you didn't capture all of it, feel free to email any one of us. Feel free to email myself, Councilmember Johnson, or Councilmember Newton, and we will connect you with the speakers that were on the panel today. So next, I would like to turn it over to my colleagues, Councilmember Newton and Councilmember Johnson, to moderate our questions coming from the audience.
Thank you, Councilmember Ajmera. So we are doing really great on time. I want to remind everyone that you can jump on the City of Charlotte Facebook page, and in the feed underneath the video today, you can ask a question. And you can also, my own Facebook page, Matt Newton for 5, as well as Matt Newton has a feed to this meeting where you can ask questions, as well as Councilmember Ajmera's Facebook page. So please jump on there right now. Please make sure too that you're asking serious questions. So questions that specifically pertain to small business relief here in the city of Charlotte, maybe even the greater region, so Mecklenburg County. One of the first questions, and I think I'm going to throw this one over to you, Holly. We've gotten a lot of questions about the micro grant program, our corridors, where those corridors exist. Now, it's my understanding that the corridors are larger, so they're really the 8 areas surrounding the corridors. One question in particular was pertaining to the NODA area, but maybe in a broader sense, can you speak to certainly whether NODA is within one of the opportunity corridors for our micro grant program, but beyond that, where these corridors exist within the city?
Okay, I will do my best to answer that. Yeah. Again, the map, I know, right? I'm like, oh, I don't have the exact boundaries. And by the way, the other affinity chamber I missed was the Latin American Chamber of Commerce. So if they're listening, my apologies that I totally had that blank in my brain. Okay, so there are parts of NODA that are eligible. We've had a couple of businesses actually contact us that are in the NODA area. So definitely go on to, I would go to the LISC Charlotte site, just Google LISC Charlotte, and then you scroll down, it'll have the City of Charlotte Micro Business Relief Fund. Click on that, and where it says Opportunity Corridor, click on that. Upper right-hand corner is where you type in your address. The LISC Charlotte team is also amazing in helping out with that, and my team and I are happy to do those searches as well. And so I would say the best way for me to describe, it's not probably the exact, so the best way for me to describe, if anybody is familiar with the crescent and pie that we talk about sometimes in Charlotte, I would say that for South Charlotte is not into balance. That is typically not in the Opportunity Corridor, but pretty much everything else in the geography above that is. So it's a pretty large area that we're focusing this program because we focus a lot of other funding sources into that Opportunity Corridor.
Thank you for that that answer. I wanted to also just touch on, so you had mentioned earlier, Holly, the LISC website, where so LISC is helping us with the appropriation the City Council made a few weeks ago for our micro grant or micro business forgivable loan program. And if you go to the LISC website that I think you had talked about earlier, Holly, then you can jump on there and there's a link there that will take you to a map that shows the greater region surrounding those opportunity corridors. So maybe that's a great resource too. And I'll let you touch on that once again in a moment, Holly. But Another question. So a lot of questions surrounding our micro business program. I've gone through the feed here and I'm seeing questions pertaining to the number of applications that have already been approved. So I think maybe nailing or drilling down more on what's left available. And then also the processing time and how long it takes after someone applies for an application to be given word as to whether or not they've been approved or possibly not approved. And I also want to throw that over to Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell as well to possibly speak about processing time for the county's program. But let's start with you, Holly, to maybe answer some of those initial questions and then follow up with Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell.
Sure, I'm happy to answer those, and I really appreciate whoever's diving in deeper. I think it's fantastic. So I would say that right now we're actually in just receiving applications. The application takes about 20 minutes on average to fill out. I've been working a lot with West Charlotte staff, and they're tracking that kind of information. We have not actually started processing any of those applications. We did that with intentionality because we wanted to give people an opportunity to apply. I have a call with West Charlotte later on this week, and I believe that processing will start after that. Our goal is to turn this around very quickly. And what I will say is that the application is just the first step. West Charlotte, their team, will actually be reaching out to the applicant to get additional information. So that information is actually on that website, the types of things you need to be prepared for. But like the county, we're actually requiring 2 years of tax returns as well. And there's some other kind of income verification documentation that is being required. And so we expect it to really, I think we were talking about this program, rolling it out and completion would be 3 weeks at the absolute max. So this is designed to go incredibly fast. But yes, we are in an acceptance period for applications at the moment, but that will be transitioning here towards the end of the week or beginning of next week.
Thank you. And Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell.
Yes, thank you. I've just been texting our Peter Zeiler to ask him about our goal for the 10 days, and I don't have an answer on that yet. But I did want to just touch on briefly, Holly talked about the zones. She talked about how the southern part of the county is not included in y'all's program. I just wanted to make sure people know that the county also has the micro stabilization loans for the micro businesses. And so we've had, let's see, we've had 50 applications so far. Let's see, we've received 50 eligible applications, and 36 have completed the review process, 20 were approved, and 16 denied. So, and we do have more room for more applications. And so that's for all of the towns, minus Mint Hill and Charlotte. So if you are, and also the ETJ areas. So just want to make sure that folks know about that.
I think it's important to note too, so with our micro business program that we have within the city, we did identify a gap of businesses, small businesses between 0 employees, well, I guess 1 employee, and 5 that faced extreme or faced heightened challenges to receiving relief, particularly so right now in this time of crisis. And we looked at that more particularly, made an appropriation. That appropriation, I believe Holly had mentioned this before, is one that will cover upwards, potentially more, but approximately 100 businesses. We do know that we have roughly 6,500 micro businesses within the city, though, and so there is a much greater need. We do have this amount of money that we receive directly because, an amount of money through the CARES Act that we receive directly because we are a city of larger than a city consisting of more than 500,000 people. So larger than 500,000 people. And we're going to be looking at that more thoroughly as a council to see where we can increase the relief that is available to small businesses, 1 to 5, and then 5 even to 50. In as much as employees are concerned here in the future. Now, I wanted to throw a question over to Mr. Stips. I really appreciate your presentation earlier to PPP loans. And we're someone, I don't know if you mentioned this, if you have, please take the time to repeat it. But where can someone go to find out more information about the requirements for PPP loan forgiveness? And I think the question was really more specifically asking about the criteria for applying, where folks can get their bank statements and other information lined up preliminarily before the application is made.
Thank you for that, council member. They would make that request through their lending institution. The lender will be their point of contact once that 8-week period has passed for the borrower to then request that forgiveness clause within the PPP. So they would work directly with their lender to ask for that forgiveness. They can find, on the SBA website or even the Treasury website, additional information as far as documentation. But the lender, my recommendation would be talk directly with their lender because that's who they would make the request at the end of the 8-week period.
Thank you. I want to throw it back to you, Councilwoman Ajmera. I'm looking at the feed here on Facebook, and I'm not seeing any additional questions. Please, so we still have time here. Please, if you're watching, if you have a question, please let us know. Donata Jackson, who is helping in a support role, Donata, do we have any additional questions that I might have missed?
Hey, so yes, we do have a ton of questions that have come in. A really good one, and this can goes to our state and federal resources. Do I need good credit to qualify for any state or federal loan? Do I need good credit to qualify for any state or federal loan?
This is Thomas Stiff. I could respond on the PPP and EIDL. For the EIDL, one of the items that would be reviewed would be a small business or nonprofit's credit history. While there isn't a bright line of you have to have a specific credit score, that is reviewed. On the Paycheck Protection Program, they really have a streamlined review process that doesn't require collateral or a guarantor. But on the economic injury disaster loan side, as a part of the process, they will look at credit history.
This is Representative Clark for the state loan through the NC Golden Leaf Foundation. Yes, they do run a credit check on that loan as well.
Okay, great. There's also another question regarding self-employed and freelance workers. What grants and loans are available for self-employed and freelance workers?
Yes, this is Thomas Stiff again. Both the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program are available to sole proprietors, individual contractors, and consultants. So they're eligible for both initiatives.
Another question from social media, are nonprofits eligible for the COVID-19 county loan program? Are nonprofits eligible for the COVID-19 county loan program?
Yes, the nonprofits are not eligible for that program. So I do have an answer on that. But I also want to let you guys know, I said I would find out about the application process, but we are hitting that 10-day the 10-day application and getting the funds out. So I wanted to let you know I got an answer on that. So thank you for that question.
Donata, I do want to address funding for nonprofits. So United Way has set up COVID-19 response fund, and they had raised 15 million plus in their fund, and nonprofits can apply for that. There was already a first phase of applications, and they awarded grants to many organizations, and now we have second phase. So if you want to apply for COVID-19 response fund for nonprofits, please send any one of us an email, and we will go ahead and send you an application or a link. Or you can just Google COVID-19 response fund by United Way, and they're working with Foundation for the Carolinas to raise money for nonprofits. So you can apply for those resources.
Now, we also have a question regarding additional funding solutions, one in particular being Rise with Co. For Charlotte businesses. Don't know if anyone here on the panel is more familiar with Rise with Co. or any other options that are private sector funding solutions, but please, if so, jump in with whatever information you can provide for that gentleman who asked that question.
Councilmember Newton, I will let Holly address that since none of our audience can dial into this meeting. They can only ask questions on Facebook. So Holly, could you address the private organizations who are awarding grants and loans such as Witco, Facebook, Verizon, and so many other organizations that are also stepping up?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So our team is, watching the private funding. I would say something like Verizon is actually being run through LISC again. So they're using a lending institution to do that. But that is something that we're seeing popping up more and more. And so what we're doing is, because it is private, and typically, I will be honest, from a government standpoint, we've really focused on those that are government funding sources or nonprofit funding sources. We're really diving into those to really have a better understanding of what they are, to make sure we understand the impact for our small businesses.
And Councilwoman Ajmera, you had mentioned the United Way Foundation for the Carolinas Relief Fund. That is comprised certainly of some public dollars, but an awful lot of private dollars too that are available to the community. Had a question regarding our minority and women small business. What are we doing to reach small businesses that cannot access traditional funding but are viable businesses that employ people in Charlotte, most under 50 employees? I will throw this one over to you too, Holly, and then any other panelists who want to comment on this. But before I do, I do want to mention that our small business relief, including the micro business fund, is specifically targeted for our more marginalized small businesses, minority women small business. Now, having said that, we're going to be building upon that. We do have additional dollars that we recently received from the federal government through the CARES Act directly to the city. And I think that we're going to be looking at that very, very carefully and much more thoroughly to provide even more relief for small businesses across the board, including minority and women small business. Holly, if you want to jump in and comment on that, that would be great.
Sure. I think actually you really covered a lot, honestly, of what I was going to say there. So that's fantastic. I echo all of those things. And our minority and women small businesses are, from the leadership to within, I would say, even our organization of the city, are a top priority. And so we are continuing to figure out, I mean, I know we're talking about the funding side of things. We've tried to be as flexible as possible with the Small Business Relief Fund so that it is accessible to small businesses. I know there's some regulations that money with the federal money that was used that we can't necessarily get around. So what you see there is honestly what we have to put forth. But we are really trying to be as flexible as possible. That's actually why we created a grant program instead of a loan program. So there's no collateral or anything like that needed. We also have, really looking internally, we have a program that's called AMP Up Charlotte. Now, this is not something that is COVID specific, but I do want to talk about it. So AMP Up Charlotte is actually for minority small businesses that are in a growth trajectory. And so obviously we've done two cohorts of those companies. We're actually working with our graduates now to really give them intensive programming that can help them stabilize their businesses and then continue to grow. But we're really looking at the next cohort. These have to be in-person classes just based on the curriculum that we use. That's the advice we've been given from the experts that designed it. So it'll be later in the year, later in the summer, obviously, when we're together. But we're really looking at trying to figure out how do we really use that model to show really intensive support to our minority small businesses, but then actually can we expand it out so that it is for women-owned businesses as well. But it is a top priority from the top to like throughout the entire organization.
Thank you, Holly. Councilmember Newton, do you have additional questions?
So we have one more question, and please keep the questions coming because we do have time to answer more. One question was pertaining to changing or increasing the $10,000 limit for forgivable loans and grants. Now, I think that Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell can possibly comment on that. We definitely, and maybe you can comment on that too, Holly. I don't know where city staff will land on increasing that amount. We know that the need is so extensive throughout the community for relief that we want to do what we can to provide as much relief for as many small businesses as possible. But I'll throw that over to you, Holly. Once again, sorry about that, and then throw it on over to Commissioner Al to comment.
Okay, great. I'm happy to comment on that. So based on the funding, this initial funding that was available for the grant program, you know, we wanted to keep it, we did cap it at up to $10,000, and it is a grant. So it doesn't have any, when you do a forgivable loan, there's still criteria that you have to meet that you don't have to meet with a grant. And so what I would say is that as we look moving forward, yes, there is a consideration of increasing the amounts. And if we do that, then do we need to turn it into a forgivable loan, which would change some of the underwriting that would be associated with that. So again, this is all sort of new, and we're investigating the best solutions, but there is absolutely discussion around those points.
Thank you. And Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell, if you have anything to add.
So our loan amount is up to $35,000. So I wasn't sure what the $10,000 what they were referring to. Ours is the minimum is $5,000 and the maximum is $35,000. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, shows that I need to follow more county commission meetings.
No. Well, or maybe they were referring to the amount that we have in the fund. I believe it was $5 million originally. So, and when I said that we might be increasing that, I just mean, you know, depending on how much interest there is, how many applications that are, you know, valid, that we aren't able to fund with the first $5 million that we allocated, you know, maybe there'd be room for coming back and asking for more. And I know that as a result of our meeting last night, one of the questions was, is this going to be part of the money that comes through the federal government that we get reimbursed for? And so that's sort of a question that's hanging out there right now. So if that's the case, I do hope that there will be more funds available for this program. So I hope that helps.
Okay. Councilmember Newton, I have one point I wanted to inject at the appropriate time on minority loan.
Yes, sir.
I just want to reemphasize the Paycheck Protection Program. When I say there is available funds, as of yesterday, there was over $100 billion still available for loans through the Paycheck Protection Program. Our district office is sponsoring a webinar tomorrow, and we're really trying to target small minority-owned businesses, nonprofit, faith-based organizations, because they all qualify. And what we're finding now is that businesses may be eligible, but are not aware of the program, don't understand the details. And while it is initially a loan, the key component for the Paycheck Protection Program provides for a forgivable clause. And so those funds, at least 75%, if they're spent on payroll 8 weeks following the loan, or you could utilize 100%, and then 25% could be utilized for rent, utilities, that type of cost. The loan would be forgiven for that amount. And depending on your payroll costs, you may have a situation where the full loan is forgivable. So I really encourage small businesses, nonprofits that may not have looked at the Paycheck Protection Program. They feel they're eligible to talk with their local lender. We have a lender list on our website, our district office website. If they don't have an existing banking relationship, there's a significant initiative now to make sure, given that there are funds available, and while $100 billion is a lot where I come from, it won't last forever, but it is available now. And we really encourage small businesses, particularly our minority-owned businesses, those that have not had traditional access to capital, to look and talk with their lenders about potential applications.
I believe we had some more questions from YouTube. Donata, did you want to take those, or Councilwoman Johnson?
I believe Ms. Johnson does have a question regarding PPP loans, so that'll be a good segue.
Thank you, Donata. Mr. Stitt, I wanted to know if there is any guidance or what can a small business do to find a resource on guidance on using or accessing that PPP loan. For example, you just gave a very specific strategy about the 75% being used for payroll and 25% being used for other expenses. Where is that information? If a small business, such as the sole proprietor or a contract worker, does not have a relationship with an established lender, where can they obtain practical guidance?
Sure, great question. Twofold. One, if a small business does not have an existing lender, if they go to SBA.gov/NC, SBA.gov/NC, that is our district SBA office that's located here in Charlotte. It is for available, obviously, for the entire state. We have a listing of lenders that are working with SBA in North Carolina. We can't recommend specific lenders, but we can provide a broad list of potential options for a small business. If they don't, again, they could talk with those lenders for additional information. Also, SBA at SBA.gov/coronavirus, SBA.gov/coronavirus is the main SBA website that will give information on all our initiative and specifically the Paycheck Protection Program. And as I mentioned, that 75% threshold is required to trigger that forgivable clause. So whether they have 75% or they could use up to 100% on payroll, that would provide forgiveness for that amount of the loan. So as an example, if they had a $50,000 loan, in 8 weeks, they spent $45,000 on payroll, their loan would be reduced to $5,000. Now they would have to maintain payroll records, and the bank would work with them to validate. But that's why we're stressing now that because of availability of funds, the PPP could be a very viable option for small businesses and nonprofits.
Thank you for that information. We do have a lot of sole proprietors and that had that question that weren't able to access the first round. I also want to make sure that everyone has the website, the email address, Charlotte Supports Small Business at charlottenc.gov. And what we'll do is ensure that that's posted on our Facebook and our YouTube channel, so that if there are any questions that are not answered today, that you can email our small business department. I'll turn it over to Donata. Are there any questions that have not been answered via YouTube or Facebook, Donata?
I believe Dale may want to weigh in on.
Sure. Thank you. This is State Treasurer Falwell, and not sure exactly how this is going to close, but I'm honored to have been on this call. And the main reason I want to be on the call is to hear from you and to learn from all the presenters. So I appreciate the opportunity. Secondly, want to say that as relates to what Thomas Stith just said, a lot of the rules, from my understanding, about the other 25%, going back to the earlier question, a lot of those rules are sort of fluid and they're being developed. And I think, and Thomas could comment on this, they're unlike the payroll part, there's going to be a period of time, but it's really important as far as that other 25% that your businesses keep diarizing, if that's the right word, or journaling or memorializing what they're spending money on, so that if it ever does come back and when they get audited on the 25%, they have everything in line, because once the economy opens up, people are going to have a lot to do. And lastly, and some of you have seen this before, if this is the shape of California and this is the shape of North Carolina, you'll never believe this, but for 63 miles, we have as much border with other states as California does. But if you think about California, there are no major population centers on the border of California that border another state. Think about ours: Asheville, Charlotte, Wilmington, Rocky Mount, Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and Boone. My point of holding this up to you and getting you to think about borders is that money does not know where the border is. Money goes where it's invited and stays where it's welcomed. And all of these topics about business loans and business grants and all these really important programs, unless we can get businesses open partially, people are going to take their money and their capital and they're going to simply go across the border and spend it. So I applaud all the small businesses that are hanging on. I am, as I look out across the state, especially in rural North Carolina, I can tell you that we're praying for all those to reopen and to thrive the way they were 3 months ago. But reopening these businesses and bringing the joy of achievement back to these small business owners create something that I've always said all of my life: motion creates emotion. And people's emotions are way down right now because their emotion and their routines have all been upset, whether it's the grocery store or opening their businesses back up. And I applaud you folks for all that you put into this effort. And I will tell you, as the state treasurer, that I will do everything I can to help Charlotte, Mecklenburg County.
You're now the host.
Okay. The joy of achievement and upward mobility back to the people of that community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. We have one more question that that might be a good segue to this next question that we can maybe wrap up on. So the question is, can you share a latest update on the plan to safely reopen businesses and measures we as citizens can do to ensure our part to keep others safe? And I will quickly give a stab at that. Representative Clark, if you want to then jump in, that would be fantastic. But the new order issued by our governor on yesterday is opening all businesses with the exception of the exception of personal care, grooming, and entertainment-oriented businesses. Now, that includes salons, barbershops, massage therapists, many businesses that we know fall within the micro business or the more defined 5 employee to 50 employee segment of small business. So the need will still certainly exist. We know that there is still going to be a lot of unpaid bills in need, regardless of the circumstance. But from the standpoint of answering the question, all businesses, with the exception of those, now retail, restaurant, and bars are also going to have certain requirements to be met, such as limiting occupancy and making sure, so with restaurants and bars, that they aren't open for in-customer sit-down service so much as takeout and delivery. And in all instances, the new executive order, which in effect is a new stay-at-home order, frankly, that is broader and relaxes a lot of the restrictions in the original order. It also continues to emphasize all of the social distancing techniques that have been emphasized over the past few months, making sure that we stay 6 feet away from one another, making sure that we wear PPE, if at all possible, mask, and also wash our hands diligently and as often as possible. But hopefully that helps with the question, maybe answers some of it. But Representative Clark, if you have anything that you would like to weigh in on there as well, please do. If you're still with us, I think we might have lost Representative Clark's feed. So I will kick it over, and hopefully I answered that question. Once again, if you have any other additional questions, as Councilwoman Johnson had mentioned earlier, please feel free to reach out to us at the city. And you can also email all of us. My email is matt.newton@charlottenc.gov. You can jump on our own, our Facebook pages too. So if you actually want to read the new executive order, that is on Matt Newton for 5. That Facebook page. So let me kick it back over to Councilwoman Ajmera, or alternatively, Councilwoman Johnson to wrap things up for us here.
Councilwoman Johnson, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I do. I want to thank all of the presenters today. Thank you for the businesses that participated. Again, we hear you. But lastly, I do want to say that this is a health crisis. So everyone should stay safe. We know once the health crisis is over, the economic crisis will truly be over. So we're working, we hear you, we're working for the assistance. And as you know, the governor we are entering into the first phase of lifting the stay at home. But primarily take care of yourselves, take care of your families. Because this is a very serious illness. And that was the reason that all of this was done in the first place. So keep that in mind. We are doing our best, but there is a balance to safety. So again, thank you. I hope we got all the questions answered. Feel free to reach out to us via our email addresses or Facebook pages. We're going to share the email address. Charlotte cares about small businesses. It will be on the social media. And thank you again. That's all I have. Thank you.
Government channel, go to the City of Charlotte Facebook page, and you will see another fantastic town hall being held by Councilwoman Julie Eisolt and Councilwoman Victoria Watlington. Thank you all once again for your participation today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.